gladiators, blood, violence, legendary fights. That seems to be what sticks out in people's mind when they see or hear about the Colosseum. When I think about the Colosseum, I become overwhelmed by trying to comprehend how such an amazing structure could have been built and operated 2,000 years ago, and bring people together from all over the entire empire. So I don't know if you guys are as fascinated by ancient architecture as I am, but hopefully today I can shed a little light on the lesser known facts about the Colosseum, which was also known as the Flavian Amphitheater. So if I refer to it as the amphitheater, that's what I'm talking about. So fortunately, my sophomore year of high school, I was able to study art history, AP Art History, and I got to learn about 5,000 years of art, just by era almost. And I became fascinated with art and architecture, specifically from the Greco-Roman era. The complexity and size of these structures perplexed me, and I decided to look into it on my own a little bit, and specifically the Colosseum. So it's located in Rome, as many of you know. It was constructed 2,000 years ago in between 70 and 80 BCE, which means before Common Era. It's a more correct term than BC. History's online article titled Colosseum, published in 2009, provides clarity into the commissioning and construction of the project. They specify that Vespasian, who was a Flavian emperor, commissioned the project between 70 and 72 AD, and his son Titus officially opened the Colosseum in 80 AD, which, that's a decade to build the entire Colosseum, which is kind of incredible. So for the first 100 days that the Colosseum was opened, there were gladiator fights and wild animal fights daily, and it was free for 50,000 guests. And it was made out of concrete, and as many of you know or have heard, Roman concrete was unnaturally strong, which is why, 2/3 of the Colosseum is still standing today, and the aqueducts are still standing. So there were 3 levels, and they were all constructed of concrete, and they were basically, each of the levels was constructed in a different style or order. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about the orders. So in art history, we learned about the column orders, and that's just the style that the building was constructed in. So the first floor of the Colosseum is built in Doric order, or Tuscan. It's kind of the Roman version of Doric. And as you can see, it has a simpler base and very simple column. And the defining aspect of it is the triglyph metope pattern up here, meaning there's a separation between each relief sculpture. The second floor is Ionic, and it has a little more detail in the base, a little more ornamentation, especially here in the Capitol. And the frieze has a full relief sculpture. And the third floor is Corinthian, and it has a curved base, generally, a little more segmentation, a floral capital, and segmented architrave, and then the frieze is either empty or it has a painting on it, because there's so much attention at the Capitol that they don't want to take away from that. So another unusual aspect about the Colosseum is outlined by Catherine E. Welch in her 2007 book, The Roman Amphitheater. She points out that the amphitheater was built atop an artificial lake that had once been the center of the Golden House, which was a palace constructed by Nero, who was Vespasian's predecessor. And the palace was unnecessarily large and fancy, and it kind of made the empire angry almost, because it was just a show of money and materialism. And so by building the Colosseum on top of the artificial lake that took so much money and resources, the Flavian dynasty felt as though they were giving the center of Rome back to Rome, and that's why the Colosseum is located where it is. And just thought I'd include a little fun fact. If you cross the street from the Colosseum and somehow were able to drill underground, you would quite literally drop into Nero's palace, because it's still underground, but now today there's apartments and stores built on top of a 2,000-year-old palace, which I thought was pretty fascinating. So now on to what I find really interesting. So as we all know, the gladiator fights and battles in the Colosseum are pretty common, and that's what a lot of people think of, just gladiator battles. But what not a lot of people know is about the Hypogeum, which is the system of tunnels and trapdoors underneath the floor of the arena. There were 36 trapdoors and 80 vertical shafts that provided direct access to the floor of the arena and allowed like staff, I don't know exactly what they were called, to put animals and surprise fighters up into the arena. And I remember being amazed by the kinds of animals and the amount of animals that they used, but I never really knew the, that's the Hypogeum, by the way. I never really knew the extent of it, so I'm not going to read it because it's a lot of statistics, but if you want to just browse and see. So according to Tribunes and Triumph's article, Wild Animals at the Colosseum, exotic animals such as zebras and ostriches were trained to pull chariots, and dangerous exotic animals were often used to surprise fighters and kill defenseless prisoners that were in the arena. This list of animals shows kind of how far the empire reached. Tigers from Asia, elephants from Africa. And the Guardian's article, Lion Kings Capturing the Beasts for the Colosseum, Rory Carroll explains how the Imperial Army troops would entertain themselves by capturing these animals. And some of the troops actually became specialists and made games out of snaring these animals and shipping them back to Rome. And a not so fun fact is that the Romans actually hunted a few species to extinction and a lot to almost extinction. And so by reading Tribune and Triumph's article, Beneath the Colosseum, I found out that there were rainforest scenes, desert scenes, mountain scenes, and even an ocean scene where they staged sea battles with ships. In addition to the trapdoors and access to the arena floor, I learned after reading Mario Como's article, The Colosseum, published in July of 2017, that there are cryptoportici, which are these side things on the underneath the Colosseum that house the gladiators and the animals. And as told by Tribunes and Triumph's article, Decline of the Colosseum, the reason that the gladiator fights stopped was because of a monk named Telemachus who stepped between two gladiators and yelled, "In the name of Christ, stop," and was then stoned to death by an angry mob. And so the emperor decided, after thinking about it for a few days, it was weighing on his conscience, he decided to stop the games completely. And so after this, repairs stopped being made on the Colosseum and money stopped being put into it. So as natural disasters struck, the Colosseum began to fall apart. And the broken off material was scavenged. And essentially, the Romans would use material from fallen buildings and old structures to make new ones, but the Christians decided that they wanted to keep the Colosseum there as a symbol of the Christian martyrs who died. So it's a little bit ironic that a Christian monk stopped the fights, which led to the fall, but also saved the Colosseum in the end. So even though it's not used today, it's still a symbol of Rome and gathers people from all over the world to see it, and wasn't that the original goal of the Colosseum, to bring people together? So that's a little connection that I made, but I hope you guys learned a little bit more about the Colosseum, at least today, so that's it.
Okay. Cassandra, how did that go?